One of the problems that we always have is that the kind of culture in which, say, children evolved is hard to replicate in our current culture. So I always say, sort of ideally, what you'd have is a 6-to-1 ratio where you'd have 6 grown-ups taking care of each child. And maybe a better way of putting it is that you'd have a community of parents, you'd have a community of caregivers. The children are there as part of that community. It's not as if anybody is sitting there and doing a bunch of special things that are just directed at the child. So the vision that we have from school, there's someone who's got this special responsibility of shaping the education of the child, is the vision that is often imported into being a parent. So there's some special set of things you should do, some flashcards or video or something other than what you would normally do. That's the thing that you are supposed to do to educate the child. And what the data, the research shows, is that children are learning from just observing and participating in the everyday things that people are doing in an incredibly subtle and powerful way. So all the the irony is that the unconscious things that you do when you're interacting with children are much more likely to shape and affect the way they think than any of the things that you actually consciously decide to do. And I think we have some lovely models for the way that, for example, my personal favorite is cooking. So my grandchildren come and cook with me. Children love cooking. They love being involved in. There's nothing that seems more interesting to them than an adult who's actually trying to do something, actually trying to bring something about, and integrating them into that work. So in a sense, in the village, the line between here's work and here's children just wasn't there. Now the question is, what do we do now to try to, when that's no longer true, we're no longer growing up in a village, what can we do now to kind of recreate that situation? And I think the best preschools essentially recreate that village for children. So what they do is put children in a context with a lot of adults who really care about them, who are warm, who are supportive, and lots of stuff for them to play with. Another thing I say sometimes is, if you really wanted to know what children, preschool children, young children need to thrive, they need mud, livestock, and relatives. And those are things that are in sort of short supply, but we can try and say a good preschool to replace the mud, livestock, and relatives with good teachers and cocoons and caterpillars and sandboxes. But that's much more what young children are learning for than all the kind of very scholastic academic activities that parents feel as if they need to engage in. And I think that also makes life as a working parent easier than if you think that you have one job and then you have another job, to think that you have a job and then you have this relationship, this kind of form of love that you have with these children that you're engaged in. It's not the same thing as work. Part of the trouble in our culture, in our society, is that we measure everything, we treat everything as if it's either a kind of production or a kind of consumption. So from that perspective, either having children is an extremely badly paid job, or else it's an extremely expensive luxury. And caregiving for children and for people in general just isn't a kind of production or a kind of consumption. It's its own thing. It's a deep, important part of being human beings, that we make these profound commitments to other people. We care about those people. We do what we can to let those people thrive on their own terms and in their own way. That's a deep thing that we do specifically about children, but it's a part of our relationships with spouses. It's a part of our relationships with, say, our parents when they get older and we have to take care of them. And it's something that's kind of invisible in our culture at large because it doesn't fit into the production bucket or the consumption bucket. One way to think about it is, instead of thinking about parenting, we should be thinking about being a parent. And it's interesting that we don't wife our husbands, and we don't friend our friends, and we don't child our parents. We wouldn't measure the quality of any of those relationships by saying, oh, let's see, is my husband actually, has he achieved his benchmarks? Is he better than he was when I married him? You work at relationships, you put time and energy into them, but you don't think of them as in this kind of shaping process. And one of the things that makes caregiving so interesting, so much more interesting than it is on the parenting model, is these deep tensions, these kind of paradoxes that come in caregiving, where we have to go from taking care of the most dependent creature we know of, a human baby who completely requires us to make decisions for them, to keep them alive. And the outcome of all that is to try to create an adult who's completely independent of us, who's completely autonomous, who can make decisions, including making terrible decisions, independently of us. In some sense, if your children don't have the potential to fail, then you haven't succeeded as a parent, because what you want to do as a parent is make someone who's independent and autonomous enough so they can take risks. And taking risks means the possibility of failure. That's a different kind of activity than almost any other kind of human activity. And it's deep and profound, and it's a big reason that human beings have been able to succeed as well as they have.